Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Powerful Women Today, Money Wednesday, with one of our mentor experts, an absolute incredible, generous expert when it
Yeah.
comes to women and the law, Marlene Doss, to guide us through commercial real estate. And you're thinking, what does that have to do with me? You will be surprised at how it is affecting every single one of us. So let's get to it.
Empowering women on a global scale. Welcome to Powerful Women Today with Carolina Billings. Powerful Women Today is on a mission of inclusion, rewriting his story to include her story, and empowering, raising, and amplifying women's voices with professional speaking, publishing, original podcasting, and web TV. And now here's your host, the founder of Powerful Women Today, Carolina Billings.
Hi, Marlene. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
You are with Ion Law Partners. You are our Women in the Law expert. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure being with you, Carolina, and with all of you.
Thank you, darling. So we're going to talk about, from the headlines, right? Straight from the headlines. There's a lot. So COVID took a little bit longer than we anticipated. It's now been 18 months, and we are seeing the long-term effects that COVID has had on our everyday transactions, right? Especially in retail, hospitality, and employment. Those are the biggest three things that affect our life for the most part. And a lot of people, when we pick the topics that we discuss through the female lens at Powerful Women Today Live, a lot of people think this has nothing to do with me, right? Well, it does. So let's talk about commercial real estate when it comes to retail and hospitality. Let's start there because most women entrepreneurs in the traditional sense have always steered towards retail and hospitality, restaurants, retail shops, and such. What is going on right now in the market?
Yeah, so let's start out with, as you were mentioning, defining what commercial real estate is. And retail and hospitality and those kinds of industries is part of it. And on the other side, there's the traditional commercial leases for, business owners like firms, accountings, other professionals. There's multiplexes that are also considered commercial real estate. And there's a few other industries. So some of them have been impacted more than others, as you mentioned. And unfortunately, retail is one of the ones that's been heavily hit. The other areas, they're starting to see people, a little bit of recovery on it, at least in Canada and primarily in the Toronto market. And that's where I am. So where I can most readily speak to, that some of those commercial real estate industries are starting to recover from COVID, and not to say that it's great, but retail is one of the ones that's a little slower. I mean, as we're starting to see restaurants and stores and malls, etc., opening up, starting to get a little better, but there's obviously still a lot of vacancies and a lot of people that couldn't keep up with their lease agreements.
That's right. And that's what we're talking about, right? So the mall, and I'm glad that you mentioned the mall because just before COVID, a lot of stores were being affected by online shopping. So our concept, as we knew,
Yes.
suburbia, the urban sprawl and the mall, right? It's been a staple of that urban sprawl.
Yes.
Had been changing. And we had already began to see those massive department stores walking away from retail because their footprint, the real estate footprint, was huge, right? And it was just unsustainable. Add that a tier of COVID to it, right? And a lot of small businesses have not big chains. Big chains, you see them consolidating, right? Closing
Right.
a number of stores, but they're still in business. They still have an online strategy. I'm speaking about the small to mid-size, non-chain entrepreneur. right?
Mm-hmm.
So now they're finding themselves in these opening, closing, people are scared. There's a whole myriad of factors that are affecting on a daily basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
What can someone do? So I'm an entrepreneur. I have this lease that I can no longer, afford either the square footage or just the price, right? What can someone do?
So it depends on what the
Million-dollar
lease says.
question.
Yeah, and you know what? Okay, so it depends on what the lease says. If
Mhm.
the lease is structured so that it allows you to sublet,
Mm,
then
mm.
that's an option. Generally speaking, they're not written so that you can use COVID as a reason to get out. Now, when
Yeah.
people have been entering into leases for commercial properties
Mhm,
during COVID, a lot
mhm,
of the language has changed,
mm.
and we're seeing a lot of drafting, including, COVID related
Right.
language in there
Okay.
to allow, what happens when there's a shutdown again? Are you still responsible for the rent? What happens if you have your lease and it's started, but you don't actually get to use the premises like you're paying for? Then what happens to the rent? Do you still have to pay it? Does it get postponed? Inevitably, not inevitably, and what portion of it, all of it, part of it, all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of negotiations now when you're entering into leases, or at least since COVID started, that's factoring in for the COVID impact. And I think that's going to continue for some time because it doesn't look like COVID's going to leave us some people are anticipating till 2023, 2024. It looks like it's going to be something that we're dealing with for a while.
Correct. That I would like to explore one point that you just made.
Sure.
That the new lease. So 2 points. The new leases that you're entering into now have different language, right?
Mhm.
Is it possible with your help, with someone that's working for you? Remember, the landlord in commercial maintenance companies and things like that, they're not necessarily, they're working for their sponsor, right? Whoever's paying their bills. So you always need to have independent, or you always should have independent legal advice, right?
Yes.
Now, so I have a lease with a commercial lease, right? Or an office. In my case, would be office. So I don't want to use me because offices are a little bit different than
Yes.
most people. But say I have a lease with X, type of facility, right?
Mhm.
Is it possible to renegotiate it before the term is due, right? Because of COVID, because your needs have changed, whether you're now having half your workforce work from home, or you're trying to, I don't know, sublet or whatever. Is it possible to renegotiate and add that new COVID language to your lease?
So the renegotiation
Mm-hmm.
is up to the landlord, right? Because generally speaking, you're negotiating, it sounds like you're saying, can you renegotiate for less territory, perhaps
Yeah,
with
before the
lower
term
rent,
is due.
etc.
Like before the term is due.
Yes,
Can
yes.
you have an agent such as yourself, right? It's
Mhm.
usually best if you have a third party negotiate for you, right?
Yes,
It's a little bit less emotional, and they're more proficient in the art of negotiating than
yes,
the entrepreneur might be, right? Um,
yes.
can you negotiate before your term is up and change the languages so that there's provisions or changes to it?
Look, you can propose it. What I'm saying is it's up to the landlord whether they're willing to enter into those negotiations or not.
Correct.
You know, some of them will dig their heels in and say, no, sorry, this is what you're on the hook for, and you're just going to have to recover it. And whether it's now or once COVID's over and you're up and um, and if you claim bankruptcy, then you claim bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
So, they're in that way, they're in a bit of a position of power,
More, yeah. And you
right?
know what is good that you mentioned that, because I think the point that I would like to emphasize to our audience is that don't be afraid to renegotiate. Don't
Hmm.
think they may come back and say no,
That's right.
right?
It
They
never hurts to ask the question. That's the bottom
correct.
line.
Never
And you
hurts.
may not get everything that you want, but if you can get something that is mutually beneficial to you and to the landlord, and half of something is better than all of nothing, right?
Correct.
So if that's
Concession.
kind of something that you're trying to, sort out with them,
Mhm.
they also have the ability, generally speaking, to refuse a sublease, right? Because they'd have to approve who they're subletting to and make sure that they are financially a good tenant as well. And you're still on the hook ultimately when you're subletting, right?
Mhm.
It's still you that's on the primary lease. So you're still on the hook. It doesn't completely let you out.
Yeah.
Um,
And
if you
sometimes
can transfer the lease, then that's a great possibility. And if you find the right tenant for them, for instance, who's stronger financially and it makes sense, then perhaps the landlord will let you out of it if that new
yeah,
tenant signs.
correct. And it's
But
interesting about the sublet that it's not something you can do on your own. It's not you cannot just decide, oh, you know what, I know somebody that can pick up my unit, or that they need
mhm,
offices, or they need a rental space, and I can
yes,
simply just let them come in, they pay me, I pay, without the landlord knowing, right? And
yes,
without your insurance company knowing, for that
that's
matter.
right. Yes. Depends on the size of the commercial property that you're dealing with and what the actual terms of the lease are. Some of them are more flexible, some of them are not,
Mhm.
right? Because it's depends on the business of the landlord too. If their tenants affects their reputation, etc., they're obviously going to want to have a say in it. But whatever lease agreement that you would have signed with them initially is what would dictate that. So the
Yeah.
starting point is always your lease agreement. And a lot of people sign these lease agreements and they don't really know what's in it.
Correct. The
Um,
small print, right, is
that's right.
everybody thinks that their boilerplate kind of,
That's
all
right.
this agreement is the same as all.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, especially if they haven't used a lawyer during the negotiation or prior to signing the lease agreements.
Mhm.
Um, I know everybody is told that you should consult with a lawyer before you sign this, but a lot of business owners don't. As long as the main things are in there, they're satisfied. But it's when the issues arise and it's like, oh, what can I do? What can't I do? What
And
does this actually mean for me?
I'm always amazed, as an entrepreneur, I'm always amazed how people don't read. And by the way, our even the agreements for Power Women today are
Mhm.
simple, right? We're not talking small print. We're not talking, legalese language. And,
Mhm.
you will specify certain clauses that even put a space to initial beside it, which people do.
Right.
But
Yes.
then when something comes up and you are reminded of that agreement, they're like, "Oh, well, I didn't realize." It's like you put your initials right beside it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
And
how
it's
do
the lawyer's job to make sure that you actually understand what you're signing before you sign it and go through
you
the details with you.
yeah.
Excuse me,
So
if necessary.
your law partnership, Ion Law, does specialize in real estate. That is one of the area that you guys really provide a lot of service to the public. And one of them can be a lease review.
Absolutely. We also have a corporate commercial side as well. So
Mhm.
in any aspect of it, we can definitely help you out. But on the flip side, I was just going to say, as much as the commercial real estate market has been hit and hurt, it's actually has been a good time for some people to make their entrances into
Yes.
these kinds of things because rental rates for commercial real estate had dropped. Vacancies are obviously more available, so you have your pick really of where you want to end up. So if you are able to, it's actually not a bad time to try to get into
That's
the
right.
commercial
And
real
to
estate.
negotiate it longer terms that are advantageous to you, right?
Yeah,
Because right now it's a buyer's market,
that's right.
right?
Yes,
For
yes.
commercial leases. And
Hmm.
it's interesting how times change. Like I remember when Powerful Women Today, so I decided to become an entrepreneur full time,
Hmm.
which would be about 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago. There was a lot of um, judgment, if I don't want to, if for lack of more a more delicate word,
Hmm.
there was a little bit of a judgment for entrepreneurs who work from home. In fact, there were some professional associations that if you did not have a business address,
Yes.
right, it would look bad on your application, or it would look bad in your, the credibility of your business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that has changed. Now everybody, or working from home, is so much more, like accessible and
Mm-hmm.
much more credible, right? And accepted by the population at large. Yet there's still a lot of people, yourself and myself included,
Yes.
that still choose to have a business address, even though we don't have to. We could easily work from home, right? To
Mm-hmm.
some degree. It's difficult to meet clients, at home, but now that we're back to meeting people face to face, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of options for entrepreneurs to, like you said, enter the commercial real estate market, either by renting an office or renting a boardroom or renting, small little bits.
That's
What
right.
are some of the things that entrepreneurs or professionals should look out for when considering, sharing space with someone else?
So you'd want to make it, you want to know yes, what you're entitled to, obviously. Basically, what are you getting for what you're paying for?
Mhm.
Is it limited? Are your liabilities limited? Are you sharing in the utilities? Are you not sharing in the utilities? Again, if a shutdown happens, are you still obligated to pay
Yeah,
your
in
proportionate
space
share,
down,
right?
what about your I hadn't thought about that. What about
Hmm.
your access? And also
Right.
a point that you just made, that if you are subletting from someone, you almost need to make sure that the landlord knows that you know what I mean, that
Yes.
there's an awareness that you are a legal occupant via sublet of that unit, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise, you could be paying rent, and then the person that you're subletting from could perhaps not be paying rent, and
Again, the
then
responsibility ultimately falls on them. If you're subletting, the responsibility falls on the primary tenant, right? To make sure that the rent is paid. So, I mean, obviously, if the landlord is, or sorry, the tenant is supposed to get the landlord's permission, then you want to make sure that that's taken care of so that you're not put in a predicament. But usually, when you're dealing with workstation sharing things, it's not as complicated as an actual sublease.
Mhm.
So it depends on what you're leasing. Are you leasing a workstation? Are you leasing the permission to use the address for
Yeah,
service? And just using the printer or the photocopier for a
fee.
nominal amount in the month? Yes. Or are you actually leasing an office space? And what does that mean? So that's a little bit more involved with the sublease. Usually, if it's something like that, your sublease is going to say for X amount of money, you're leasing the space. You'll have access to the premises at these hours, for these days. If you want more, then we can speak about it. And, one parking space, not parking space, those kinds of details are in there, but it's not overly complicated. Now, if it's a sublease in a bigger property, then you're also supposed to get the original lease and understand that as a subtenant, you're you have to also meet the requirements of the main lease. So just
Oh, I
because you're
see.
leasing from this individual, you can't do anything that contradicts the main lease.
So you should really be reviewing both
Both.
your new
Yes.
sublet lease and the original lease.
Yes. Again, it depends on the context of where you are, but generally speaking, yes. And especially for you know, bigger spaces, or if you're taking over the whole lease as a subtenant, right, of a retail space or whatever, you're taking over the whole thing, then yes, you would definitely want to look at the primary lease and make sure that you're okay with those terms because you are essentially agreeing to abide by those terms.
And those are
Whether
the
it's for the same rent or less rent or whatever it is, that lease does not go away unless you become the lessor,
and
the
that is
leasing.
those are the type of things that really you won't know how to advise someone unless you've had the opportunity to review
Mhm.
this specific contract. It's not all contracts are equal. And that
No, they're
is
not.
something we have to remember. Just because you've signed a
That's right.
lease before doesn't mean that those are the same terms and conditions for a lease now. For
Absolutely.
sure. What are some of the common errors, like, just a couple of samples that you see, where you're thinking, I wish you had come to see me before, right? Um, can you think at the top of your head some flags that our audience and in our women entrepreneurs should be on the lookout for?
It's not necessarily common errors, but generally speaking, if those leases are coming to you from the landlord, they are favorable to the landlord.
Ah,
So they're not there to look out for you. It's up to you to get your lawyer and make sure that you agree with everything or don't agree with anything, and if so, our job is to come in and say, you understand what they're asking you to do here and you understand your obligation here. Are you okay with it? Is this something that you want to negotiate? Um, if you leave the premises, are you allowed to rent and run a similar business in a similar area? Not similar, there's different. I mean, it's similar to employment contracts in a way. I mean, no, they're very different. Let me clarify that. But it's the nuances, it's the details of what the landlords are saying your obligation is as a tenant,
you
and
can
whether it's
establish.
fair and reasonable. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's
So,
not a free for all. Like,
no.
people. What I notice, and this is a growth area, a learning skill area of development for a lot of new entrepreneurs, that a contract is a contract.
Yes,
Everybody's relying on terms and conditions. And if you sign on the dotted line, there's an expectation that you will honor
it's
those
binding.
terms and conditions. So
That's
you
right.
need to make sure that they are favorable to you as well, or that they are equitable
Yes.
between the landlord and the tenant. And
Hmm.
the only person that can read that legalese is a lawyer. Like,
And
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even before it gets to us, actually, if you are dealing with commercial real estate and that kind of, well, commercial real estate, it's strongly recommended that you use a strong commercial real estate agent
Okay.
because they will know the market. They will know what you can and can't ask for. They will know whether the rent that's being asked is reasonable.
I was just thinking fair
Yes, we
market
deal with,
for the
right.
rate.
We
Yeah.
we will definitely step in and assist with the actual lease agreement if and when it needs to be negotiated, or when you're ready to get to the signing spot. But having a good real estate agent will let you know exactly what's included, what's not included in rent. They can negotiate also, so they get involved in the negotiations with the landlords if you're ready to put an offer in on a commercial
So a little
space.
bit of an investment at the front, right?
Sorry.
Put a little bit of an investment at the front, be it on using a real estate agent, or making sure that your attorney reviews all the terms and conditions and that helps you negotiate, can
Yes,
save you thousands of dollars. Like,
that's right.
in commercial real estate, is thousands. It's usually your second or third largest expense after cost of goods and in salaries. The
That's
next
right.
biggest expense will be your rent most of the time.
That's right. Exactly.
So
Completely agree with that.
having someone,
Yeah.
having someone review your terms and conditions, and especially we were just speaking about newcomers, right? A lot of new
Hmm.
Americans, a lot of new Americans, a lot of new people in a new land, right? A
Hmm.
lot of people to start businesses because it's one of the easiest ways to get into the economy, right? Opposite to salaries, where you run into situations where you need a local experience. It's a little bit more barriers to entry than to start your own business, right? But when you're starting your own business and you are getting involved with leases in commercial contracts and anything like that, you really need to spend the time and money and the resources and the investment in making sure you understand what is
Yes.
it you're getting into, in what are the
Absolutely.
terms and conditions and what you can and cannot do.
Absolutely.
And of
You don't
course,
want to have renter's remorse
yeah,
once
well,
you
yes,
finally leave, you
it's
know?
very real. It's a
Hmm.
legal contract with legal consequences.
That's
So
right.
of course, we have our very own trusted mentor expert, Marlene, and she's always advising us. And I'm telling you, even us internally, we're always asking, like, can we do this? Is this what you do? And you build a relationship, right? And
Mhm.
so I strongly advise you that if you are going to enter something that you just don't know, contact someone, a trusted advisor,
Yeah.
and make sure that you are protected, because you know what, as an entrepreneur, every penny counts, right?
Hmm.
And make sure that you are using it for the right resources and not to remedy things that should not have become an issue to begin with. So
Yes, that's right.
thank you so much for all your insight and advice. I'm going to ask you to close the show for us and to give us a big takeaway. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been just a tiny little preview of season 2 of Powerful Men Today Live. Of course, Women in the Law with Marlene Doss returns for season 2, and we are extremely excited about all of the incredible topics that we're developing and touching on. And with your expansion of your law firm, now we have even more topics that we can certainly provide knowledge and insight to our audience. So sign us off.
Absolutely. I would say, don't think of COVID necessarily as a bad thing to the commercial real estate industry. If you are an entrepreneur and you're interested in it, it might be a prime time for you to start delving in and take the leap.
That's right. Upgrade or just make a change.
Yeah.
Until next time, this has been Powerful Women Today.
Bye.
Bye.
Empowering women on a global scale. This has been Powerful Women Today with Carolina Billings. To learn more about how you can join and transform your life and the lives of women everywhere with professional speaking, publishing, podcasting, and web TV, visit powerfulwomentoday.com. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you like to listen and watch your podcasts.